The difficult part of the earthquake is that it affected everything, everyone, no matter economic status or how much money they had in the bank account or how important they are for the infrastructure of the country.
My name is Kim Bentrott, and I have been a missionary for our partner CONASPEH, the National Spiritual Council of Haitian Churches. My wife Kim and I have been missionaries for 15 months in Haiti. I was called as a missionary to serve as an advisor on theological education and also as a teacher and a preacher.
My name's Kim Bentrott. I am also functioning as a missionary to CONASPEH in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I work as an advisor to health, and my job duties prior to the earthquake were advising CONASPEH on their medical outreach and education, working in a community-based clinic in the headquarters as well as one in Carrefour, and doing mobile clinics around the member churches in the communities surrounding Port-au-Prince and in the countryside.
Shortly before the earthquake hit, Kim and I had been at CONASPEH throughout the day. Kim was doing a clinic in the morning, and we were both teaching in the nursing school in the afternoon.
Finished up about 4 o'clock, and we headed home. Met up with the woman who helps us take care of our little boy Solomon during the day, and we're conversing on our patio when we started to feel sick to our stomachs and hear a loud roaring sound. And so in my mind, I thought that our building was collapsing because the floor started to pitch and weave, and we watched the neighbor's balcony rise up toward us. We held on to each other and just waited and watched to see if the rest of the apartment would collapse. It held strong.
First of all, the evening of the earthquake, we had no idea what had happened with CONASPEH, if anything. As was the case with, phone lines were not working. It was already nighttime at that point, and so it was difficult to get out and try to find people, to find their whereabouts, to see how they were doing. And so the morning after the earthquake, we had walked back to our house to see if we could get in it and try to get some passports, some supplies for Solomon. And when we came out of our house, Françoise Villiers was outside of our home, and she had walked several miles across the city without a car. Just trying to find us and see how we were doing. And so we were able to connect with her, and it was at that time that she informed us that the CONASPEH building had completely collapsed and that there were dozens of people inside, and that there was a pretty significant relief effort, or rescue effort, I should say, going on from moments after the earthquake. So we headed over to CONASPEH later that morning.
When we arrived to the scene, by that time it was, over 24 hours since the earthquake, and well, close to, and there were hundreds of people and community members gathered around. There were still some voices under the cement, and they were working to try to get those out. But by that time, you have to, these are people working with their hands. They had very little tools. I think someone found a hammer, and so they were using a hammer against rebar to try to break giant slabs of cement to try to make tunnels and holes down to where the voices were calling. We stayed there to try to lend a hand, but mostly bear witness. Families were coming to the scene with photos or names of family members, sisters, children, asking if we'd heard about whether they'd gotten out, if they were at a hospital, if they were still unknown about their whereabouts.
I really feel like the biggest story, one of the biggest stories that should have come out of Haiti after the earthquake, was how the communities came together in the tent cities, in their little communities where people were sleeping outside of their homes in the streets, and how people came together, lifted each other up, and did what they could to serve those around them. We saw this time and time again, and the violence and the looting that the media has tended to focus on is the exception to what was really taking place on the ground after the earthquake.
The first week after the earthquake really was a time where people were just trying to find people that they loved and find a place to sleep and find the next meal. CONASPEH gathered their board together 1 week after the earthquake. We gathered under a tree in a vacant lot that people slept in during the night. And the meeting opened in prayer. The first part of the meeting was essentially information sharing. People that had been known to be dead, people who had been found, churches that were either standing or not, schools that had survived or had tumbled. The first part of that meeting was full of celebrations and a lot of despair. And during the first few moments of that meeting, it was the first time I saw some of the leadership, some of the most resilient and inspirational people that we've worked with in Haiti really have a hard time moving on. For me, that was really hard to wrap my mind around, and I can't imagine what it must have been like for the people their blood, sweat, and tears in those projects have been going on for the last 25 plus years. But during the course of the meeting, they started to talk about how CONASPEH should respond. And it was pretty amazing to watch the differences in postures, in the tone of their voice, in facial expressions, as they started to talk about what they could do and how they would respond and how they would work together as a team and utilize the network that CONASPEH has had in place for all these years. So there's 6,700 churches all over the country, all organized by branches of leadership that help tie these churches together, and how they could use those branches in order to get help to the people who needed it most. And watching CONASPEH replan, and you could almost see the vision that they were discussing about cleaning up and mobile offices and the rebuilding efforts. You just watched hope form. And by the end of the meeting, we were laughing, we were telling jokes, we were giving hugs and slaps on the back, and the mood was brighter, and we had reasons to keep walking. We had a lot of work to do. Françoise Villiers at the end of that meeting said, "We need to remember that CONASPEH is not a building, it's not a church, it's not a school. It's a philosophy, it's people working together to lift each other up, and we have more work to do now than ever."
I think the CONASPEH leadership, the board of CONASPEH, the resolve that they had to reorganize and to do what they could to reach out to people and to move forward as an organization was really impressive. On the other hand, they were able to hold their sorrow and their suffering in one hand, and in the other hand, keep that resolve, keep that commitment to working on behalf of the Haitian people. And I think the dignity that they are able to keep those two things together, balance those two things, is really remarkable. And it says a lot about their character as human beings, as well as their commitment to working for a higher purpose, and that being the plight of the Haitian people.